Let's start with something honest. Not statistics, not psychology, just truth. Every man, no matter how tough he acts or how much he hides, wants one thing: to feel safe being fully himself, with someone who truly sees him, not judged, not compared, not fixed, seen. And this brings me to something powerful. When a man meets a woman who sees him, not the performance, not the persona, but him, something shifts, something deep. Most men grow up learning how to play a role, to be providers, protectors, problem solvers. And somewhere along the way, they begin to believe that their worth is tied to what they do rather than who they are. So they build a life around accomplishments, careers, assets, achievements. And that's when a line crosses a line, things that prove their value, not because they're shallow, but because they've been conditioned to believe that's what makes them lovable. And yet under all of that, beneath the titles, the status, the toughness, there's a man just hoping someone might care enough to ask, "How are you really?" Not "What do you do?" or "Where do you live?" or "What kind of car do you drive?" but "Who are you when the lights are off and no one's looking?" I once met a man, let's call him Mike, decorated Army veteran, medals, stories of courage, a warrior in every traditional sense of the word. But when I sat down with him, he didn't want to talk about war. He wanted to talk about how, after all that, he came home and felt invisible. He said, "People see the uniform, but they don't see me. They want the headline. They don't want the human underneath." That stuck with me because it's not just him. So many men walk through life as a performance, being the provider, the strong one, the one who doesn't cry, the one who doesn't complain. And over time, they forget what it even means to just be. And then, once in a while, something rare happens. A woman comes along who isn't looking to be impressed. She's not dazzled by status or swayed by swagger. She's not listening to respond. She's listening to understand. She's curious, not about his highlight reel, but about his humanity. And when a man feels that kind of presence from a woman, when he feels seen for the first time in a long time, that's what happened to Mike. He met someone who asked questions no one had asked, who didn't flinch at the messiness of his truth. She didn't try to fix him, didn't try to polish his rough edges. She just made room for him to be messy, to be real, to be himself. He told me that one night, after months of holding it all in, he broke down in front of her, and he apologized for crying. She just looked at him and said, "You don't have to apologize for being human." It wasn't therapy. It wasn't years of unpacking trauma. It was something more accessible. Empathy. It was the presence of someone who didn't need him to be strong, didn't need him to be anything except honest. That's the space men crave. A space where they don't have to pretend, where they can take off the emotional armor they've worn for years, not because they're broken, not because they're weak, but because pretending is exhausting. And being seen, truly seen, gives them permission to breathe again. It's not about ego, it's about connection. It's not about stroking pride, it's about softening the soul. Because at the end of the day, when a man finds someone who can look past the role he plays and touch the truth of who he is, he doesn't just feel loved, he feels known. And that is something every human craves, even the ones who never say it out loud, especially them. There's an old narrative that's been handed down, sometimes loudly, often silently. It says that for a woman to be loved, she needs to soften her voice, hide her ambition, and make herself smaller. That if she shines too brightly, she might overshadow the man standing next to her. That if she's too bold, too clear, too confident, she'll scare him away. And so many women have been taught, whether through culture, media, or even past relationships, to dim their light just enough to make someone else comfortable. But here's the truth that needs to be said out loud. Real men are not afraid of a woman who knows her worth. In fact, they crave it, because true strength isn't threatening, it's awakening. When a woman stands in her power, she reminds the people around her that they, too, have permission to be whole. She's not trying to dominate the room. She's not there to compete or prove herself. Her energy simply says, "This is who I am. I won't shrink for your approval, and I don't need to be chosen to feel complete." And that kind of energy, it doesn't need to demand attention. It commands it. I once spoke with a man, high-performing, successful, deeply respected in his field. He said something that stuck with me. He said, "The most attractive woman I ever met wasn't the most beautiful. She was the most grounded. She didn't try to impress me. She didn't ask me to be more or less. She just was. And in her presence, I wanted to be better. Not because she asked me to, but because I didn't want to bring anything less than my full self to someone, that's the kind of strength that inspires. We often confuse strength in women with harshness, but that's not what this is. This isn't about being cold or unapproachable. It's not about having the last word or winning every argument. True strength is found in a woman who can hold her ground with love, who can be soft without losing herself, who can support a man without abandoning her own needs in the process. Men don't crave weakness. They crave clarity. They crave a woman who knows what she wants and doesn't make them guess. They crave honesty without cruelty, boundaries without walls, and depth without games. They crave a partner who challenges them, not by making them feel inadequate, but by reminding them what's possible when two whole people come together without losing themselves. There's a calmness in that kind of strength, a quiet fire. It doesn't yell. It doesn't seek validation. It just burns steady. And when a man meets that kind of woman, one who knows her value, who doesn't trade her authenticity for acceptance, he feels something rare. Not just attraction, but admiration. And admiration lasts longer than desire. Think about the women we remember, the ones whose words echo long after they're spoken, the ones whose presence leaves a room feeling different. They are not the ones who played small. They're the ones who refuse to be anything other than fully themselves. And when a man stands next to a woman like that, he doesn't feel smaller. He feels seen. He feels called up, not put down. Because her power isn't a weapon, it's an invitation to show up as more, not out of pressure, but out of purpose. Men don't need women to shrink. They need them to rise. Because when she rises, he rises too. You sighed. Love was never meant to be measured, but somewhere along the way it started feeling like a balance sheet. Who's giving more? Who's saying less? Who's trying harder? And without even realizing it, people start keeping score. Texts become tallies, arguments become power plays, apologies become negotiations, and the worst part is, no one wins, because when love becomes a game, someone always feels like they're losing. But men, real men, aren't looking for someone to outplay them. They're looking for someone to build with them. There's something deeply powerful about knowing the person beside you is not watching your every move, waiting for you to fall behind, but is instead offering a hand, saying, "Let's move forward together." Men crave that kind of partnership, one where encouragement replaces judgment, where their dreams are met with belief, not sarcasm, where their vulnerability isn't used as ammunition later, but held with respect in the moment. I once heard a story about a couple who had a rule: we grow or we go. It wasn't a threat, it was a commitment. They agreed that their relationship would never be a place where one person stays stuck while the other evolves. So when he came home one day and said, "I want to leave my job and start my own business," she didn't respond with fear or doubt. She didn't list all the reasons it wouldn't work. Instead, she said, "Okay, let's do it right." And the next morning, she surprised him with a box of freshly printed business cards. That kind of support doesn't just boost confidence, it shapes identity. It tells a man, you matter, your vision matters, and I believe in you even when the outcome is uncertain. And it goes both ways. When she decided to go back to school at 36, unsure if she could juggle classes, motherhood, and life, he didn't question her decision. He rearranged his schedule. He picked up the extra weight without resentment because he understood growth for one is growth for both. That's what a true team looks like. Men are often taught to be strong alone, to carry the burden without complaint, to prove themselves before asking for support. But when they're with a woman who encourages instead of competes, something in them softens, not in weakness, but in trust. Because they no longer feel the need to defend, to posture, to protect themselves from the person who's supposed to be their safe space. Encouragement doesn't mean blind praise. It means holding space for someone's becoming. It means offering perspective when they lose sight of their worth. It means challenging them, not from a place of superiority, but from a place of love. And when that happens, when a man feels like he has a teammate, not a rival, he's more likely to show up fully, more likely to lead with heart, more likely to become someone better than he was yesterday. Men don't need someone to compete with. They've already got the world for that. What they need is someone who looks at them not as a project or a prize, but as a partner. Someone who celebrates their wins, grieves their losses, and reminds them that even when things fall apart, they're still worth showing up for. Because when a man feels believed in, not because he's perfect, but because someone sees potential in his imperfections, he doesn't just want to succeed. He wants to succeed with you and for you. That's not codependence. That's connection. That's what changes everything. Let's take off the mask for a moment. Not just the one we show the world, but the one we wear in relationships. The one that tries to look perfect, sound perfect, act like nothing ever hurts. The truth is, everyone's carrying something. A scar, a story, a memory they don't talk about much. We're all in some way healing from something. And in a world obsessed with appearances, it's easy to believe that love only comes when you've cleaned up all the mess, tied a bow on the pain, and figured everything out. But that's not what real connection is built on. Men don't crave perfection. They crave emotional maturity. And there's a huge difference. Perfection says, I've got it all together. Maturity says, I'm learning to hold myself together even when things fall apart. Men want to feel emotionally safe just as much as women do. But they rarely say it out loud. Why? Because for generations, men have been taught that vulnerability makes them weak and emotions make them unstable. So when they step into a relationship, what they hope for, sometimes silently, is to find someone who doesn't expect perfection, but instead offers presence. Someone who isn't waiting to catch them slipping, but willing to walk beside them when they do. Emotional maturity is powerful because it takes awareness to say, I'm feeling something right now, and I'm not going to project it onto you. It takes strength to say, I need space, but I'm not pushing you away. It takes love to say, I'm hurt, but I don't want to hurt you in return. And men notice that. They feel it. There's something deeply attractive about a woman who can hold her emotions without letting them control the room, not by pretending they don't exist, but by owning them honestly. A woman who doesn't make silence a weapon, who doesn't twist her words into daggers, who doesn't punish mistakes with passive aggression. Instead, she pauses, she reflects, she responds, not to win, but to understand. I remember hearing about a couple who had been together for almost 10 years. They'd been through job losses, a miscarriage, financial stress, family tension, you name it. I asked the man once what made their relationship last, and he said, "She never made me feel like I had to be perfect. She just made me feel like I could tell the truth, and she told the truth back." That's it. That's the magic. Not flawless Instagram moments or candlelit dinners or perfectly curated vacations. What keeps people together is the ability to look each other in the eye, even in the hard moments, and say, "I want to figure this out. Not just for me, but for us." Men crave that. A partner who can sit in the discomfort without running. A partner who can hear, "I'm not okay right now," and not panic or pull away, but say, "Thank you for telling me." Someone who knows that sometimes love doesn't look like romance, it looks like resilience. Perfection makes people walk on eggshells. Emotional maturity makes people feel safe to be human. And when a man feels emotionally safe, he doesn't retreat. He leans in. He becomes more open, more expressive, more committed. Because when love feels like a space where you can be your whole self, flaws, fears, and all, you don't hide, you show up fully and you stay. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. So let's come back to where this really begins, not with strategies, not with checklists, but with the quiet truth underneath it all. Because for all the talk about what men want, about confidence, attraction, chemistry, compatibility, what it really comes down to isn't complicated. It's not even all that mysterious. It's deeply human. Men, just like anyone else, want to feel safe. Not the kind of safety that comes from locked doors or alarm systems, but the kind that comes from being seen without being judged. The kind of safety where they don't have to perform, impress, or protect themselves from the very person they're trying to let in. They crave presence, the kind of presence that doesn't rush to fix, doesn't try to change, and doesn't confuse love with control. A woman who can simply be with them, fully, attentively, honestly. Someone who isn't caught up in who they're supposed to be, but is fully rooted in who she already is. Because that kind of presence gives a man permission to take off the armor he wears everywhere else. Most men walk into the world with a script. Be strong, be silent, be successful. Don't cry, don't feel too much, don't show weakness. And when they carry that long enough, it becomes their skin. But every man, whether he says it or not, wants to take it off. Wants to be held, not fixed. Heard, not lectured. Encouraged, not compared. And most of all, understood. Not for the image he puts out there. Not for what he achieves or what he provides, but for the parts of him that almost never get spoken, the fears he hides, the dreams he questions, the pressure he carries without complaint. When he finds someone who can hold space for all of that without making him feel less of a man for needing it, something inside of him exhales. And that sound, that breath he didn't even know he was holding, that's the sound of trust being born. It's not about being the perfect woman. It's not about getting it all right. It's about being the kind of woman whose presence feels like home. Calm, honest, strong without being harsh, soft without being fragile. A woman who knows her worth so clearly that she doesn't need to prove it. She just lives it. And in doing so, invites him to meet her in that same truth. The world tells men to keep going, push through, show no weakness. And so they build walls, thick ones, tall ones, and they get really good at pretending those walls don't exist. But inside, they're waiting for someone who doesn't just want to scale those walls, but understands why they were built in the first place. Someone who doesn't demand vulnerability, but creates enough emotional safety that vulnerability becomes the natural response. And when a man finds that, when he finds someone who doesn't flinch when he falters, who doesn't retreat when he reveals the parts of himself he usually keeps hidden, that's not just love, that's freedom, that's peace. That's the kind of connection that doesn't fade, because it's not built on image or effort or performance. It's built on presence, on depth, on the quiet, powerful knowing that says, I see you. You don't have to be anything more than who you are with me. And once a man experiences that, once he knows what it's like to feel fully met, fully safe, fully loved, not for what he does, but for who he is, he doesn't go looking anywhere else because he's already home.